Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Highlights Podcast. Oh my gosh, you guys, today is literally, I'm so excited I can't even talk about it. We have Lareals Lipkins. She is a sales trainer, a consultant, a speaker. She has worked with every organization that you can imagine, training their sales organizations for Sprint, Aflac, Wells Fargo, St. Jude, Children's Research Hospital, and more. So Lareals and I first crossed paths when we were speaking at an event for Traveling Vineyard, which is our mutual friend Kate Franklin's organization. And you guys, when I heard Lareals give her talk about her book, which is called A Woman with Vision, I was blown away. And I knew from that minute that we had to have her with our highlighter community. So Lareals, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm
We
excited.
had some, I know, me too. Now that we're finally on the internet after all of our technical difficulties, but you look and sound great. So thrilled to have you. So I had such a great time reading your book. I underlined and highlighted and dog-eared so many of your great tweetables and great quotes. And I guess the first question that I want to talk about for our listeners is when it comes to accomplishing our dreams, actually actualizing our dreams, what do you think is the biggest reason that so many of us never actually do it? Like, what really keeps us stuck, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I always tell people there's a lot that happens in between, like the intention, right? The goal that we set and the actual execution. And there's a lot of things, whether it's, fear or failure or rejection. There's a number of things, but I think if we wrapped it all into one, a lot of the times it boils down to our mindset. So, Aaron, the thing that I often find is that when we set goals by design, our goals are designed to stretch us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to grow into them. But I don't think that people actually think about that. And so they try to achieve their goals with the same mindset, with the same routines, with the same behavior. And that just doesn't work. And so you really have to change your mindset before you get to the goal in order to get to your goal.
It's so good. And I love the one thing you wrote. I think it was on page 64. You said, logic is the silent dream killer. And isn't that so funny? Because we think that being logical, being practical, getting organized, having the very clear roadmap, that sounds very logical. But you say it's a silent dream killer. So how do we know if we're being too logical or not logical enough? Like, where's that line?
Well, that's a delicate balance, right? Because we need to be realistic. But I think sometimes when we think about logic, we end up talking ourselves out of things because it just doesn't make sense. But sometimes you're going to have to do things that don't make sense in order to achieve your goal. And so you have to be willing to, has been passing my headphones. You have to be willing to take some of those risks and do some things that on paper doesn't line up, but it's going to be the thing that's going to challenge you to get outside of your comfort zone. So there is like no hard and fast, but I think you have to realize that if you're too much in your head, you're going to talk yourself out of it. And I heard a gentleman named Dana Hendricks, I think that's Dana Derricks or something like that, but he had this quote that I loved. He said, ignorance on fire is better than knowledge on ice. And that is something that I've learned to kind of live by, because I can be super process oriented, love systems, love the data, but sometimes the data will keep you stuck.
I hope my husband actually listens to this episode. He usually does not listen to any of my content, but I feel like I need to play this for him because he's one of those super data driven, super very like spreadsheets and Excel and programming. And I don't know how we ever got engaged. I don't know how we ever get anything done because he's so methodical and analytical that I always am like, babe, it's like analysis paralysis. And in your book, you say procrastination disguised as preparation. And it's almost like you're preparing and and it's like if you never pull the damn trigger, you're going to be doing this forever. And so tell me about I guess let's back up for a second. So your story is great. You have an awesome story. You were a sales trainer for 11 years. Why this topic? Like, what was the shift in your life where you went from, okay, maybe I'm ready to kind of make this jump, take this risk, actualize my dream. Tell us about your story, and then I'll go back to my other questions.
Okay, yeah. And so like you mentioned, I did sales training for 11 years, and I still do that, but now I do it for myself. So I was working for the largest sales training company in the world. I climbed the corporate ladder, went from being in marketing to sales, I built a brand. and was actually in talks to buy the Dallas franchise. And I was like, that is my dream ownership. I'm really good at what I do. And then I had my son. I had my first son. And I always thought, like, I mean, honestly, I thought, I'm going to pop this baby out and I'm going back to work. Not so much, right? So I had him, and really, Aaron, my whole like perspective changed.
Mm.
And it made me get really clear about my values. And I remember driving to work the first day coming back from maternity leave and literally crying the whole 30 minutes
Mm.
there, and sitting in the parking lot and giving myself a pep talk like, you can do it. You could do it. Like, you're making tons of money and you're traveling and you're doing this. And that no longer became fulfilling. And
Mm.
so I got really clear about what was important to me, and I realized that I didn't have to sacrifice my personal fulfillment and being the mom that I wanted to be, chasing professional success, that I could actually have both. And so I, after almost 10 years, um, resigned, and it was terrifying.
Mhm.
But I think what really for me is that I wanted to be the mom that just didn't just tell my kids that they could do what they wanted to do or be anything that they wanted to be. I wanted to be an example of that. And so that's kind of the tipping point, if you will, that pushed me over the edge to say, okay, does this really align with where you are now and who you want to be moving forward?
Mm. God, and it's so much easier said than done, isn't it? Because there are so many excuses that could have attacked you along the way in that decision making process. I mean, it's easy now that you are writing this incredible book, you're up and coming, rising superstar on the speaking circuit for MLMs and direct selling companies around the world. So now it's easy to say, like, I had my son and things changed and I did it, right? But for women that are listening, that are maybe in the parking lot having those feelings, maybe listening to this in their car right now having those
Yeah.
exact feelings, it can feel really overwhelming. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess what I would love for you to just share with us, if you don't mind, is, how do we get clear on what that vision is if we aren't as talented as you were in that moment to be like, okay, I know that I don't want this, I don't want this, I do want this. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like when you're journaling or talking with clients or even girlfriends or family, it's so easy to call out what we don't want. It's so easy to point our fingers at the things that we're like, definitely not him, not that, not her, not there. That's so simple. And then when it comes down to asking yourself or someone that you're talking to, what is it that you actually do want? God, finding that clarity, it feels like a needle in a haystack. So, I
Yeah.
mean, what is like a first step that you'd recommend if someone is like, I know I don't want to be where I am right now, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to even get started uncovering what that clarity and that vision might look like?
And I think sometimes we have this idea that we go, boom, I'm clear. Like, all of it just starts to unfold. And that's not what really happens. What happens is you take one small step. And then as you start making steps, the clarity starts to evolve. So
Mm-hmm.
I probably painted a misrepresentation. Like, I had this vision, and then like it took me 18 months to actually build up the courage to resign. Right. And then
Mm-hmm.
by that time, I'm like so far in that it's like even harder. And I just basically
Yeah.
had to tell myself, the longer you wait, the harder the decision becomes. And so when I left, I didn't necessarily have everything mapped out and have a plan. But I basically got to the point where my job was literally making me sick, and I started
Mm.
to develop like horrible anxiety, digestion problems. My jaw was popping out, and I was like, okay, this is not worth the money. And so
Yeah.
I definitely don't want anybody to get to the point where you're physically sick. And so I would say, what's the smallest step that you could take? And it might just be putting pen to pad. And sometimes it's easy to start with what you don't like and say, okay, what's the opposite of that? Like, what actually brings me joy? When do I feel the most alive? And for me, that was the challenging piece, because I was really, and I am really good at sales, right? But there was this kind of underlying piece that I was truly passionate about. And I would say it's like my zone of genius. It's like the mindset stuff. It's the below the stuff, like the mindset and the passion. The skills was easy for me to teach, but it was the below the stuff that really lit me up. So I would say, if you're kind of in that what do I do? Where do I start? Think about those things that light you up. Think about those moments that bring you the most joy. And don't think that you have to have it all figured out in the 30-minute journaling session. Like
Mm-hmm.
even 2 years after I've been gone 2 years on my own now, I'm still uncovering what it is that I ultimately want to do when I grow up. And it's okay, right? It's okay to have a journey and not have it all figured out in this one singular moment.
It's so good, Lareal. Do me a favor, babe. Do you mind turning your camera off? Because I think it's doing that thing where it's pausing, and we'll edit this out on the
Okay.
podcast. I want to make sure I get all of your audio, because it's just there's a clicking noise going on. I just want to make sure that we can, when we rip the audio for the podcast on Tuesday, that it sounds more clear. Oh, that sounds much better. Okay. So I think, yeah. Do you have your headphones in too?
Let me.
Just to make sure we get your. I don't want to miss a moment of brilliance. So make sure we have everything clear, so when we edit it, we can not miss a thing. It's doing like a clicking noise a little bit.
Yeah, I do kind of hear a little popping.
Yeah. Let me see. And my editors will edit this part out, so no worries. Just want to make sure it's not like. I want to make sure it sounds good so that people get all of your wisdom and they don't turn it off because of the quality of the noise of the technology.
Does that sound better on your end? Are you still hearing it?
It does sound better. Yeah, it does sound better. So I hate not to see
Okay.
your beautiful face, but okay. So I want to talk about one of the parts of your book, and I literally, I mean, I don't know if you can see my notes, but like these are my notes. Oh, it's still clicking. Shoot.
Still doing.
Maybe it's on my side. I don't know. I'll try turning down my volume. Ooh, yeah, it's like a clicking noise. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I do hear it.
Darn. Okay. Well, maybe we can have them edit it out. I don't know. We'll just do our best. We'll do our best. We've come this far. We'll just kind of soldier through. So tell me about I love the part of your book where you talk a lot about why we should stop trying. And that really caught my attention. Oh gosh, L'Oreal, it's really doing it.
Do you want to try? Because I can't hear it when I'm talking, but you could probably hear it when I'm talking.
Well, no, you sound okay right now.
See,
I
but I hear it when you're talking, like at the end of your words.
yes,
It's like a little popping noise.
that's what I hear too. It kind of sounds like something from Stranger Things, like a gross like creature. Okay, well we'll just do our best. I'm not sure if they can maybe edit that out. Let's just I don't know what
Will
to
you
do.
be
I guess
able
we'll
to
just
focus?
what's that?
Will you be able to focus, or is it going to bother you?
I'm just turning down my own volume so I can't hear it, and maybe that'll make it not be in the broadcast. I don't know. Let me see if I put just the one person on screen. Let's see if that changes the. Can you hear it now still?
I don't hear it.
Okay. Let's try this and see if this works. Oh wait, now it's doing it. Okay. All right, we'll give it our best go. So I love when you talked about why we should stop trying. And I read that in your book and I was like, wait, this is a motivational book about actualizing our dreams. And she's telling us to stop trying. What you're going on is you're saying basically that obviously, thoughts create things, like our words have power. And when we kind of catch ourselves saying things like, well, I'm trying to start the new venture. I'm trying to write a book in quarantine. I'm trying to figure out what my game plan is. Versus you say we should replace that with I am, like these really empowering, really intentional word replacements. And what a simple, easy, tiny switch to make without any investment or any, study that can really help to impact how we go forward and how we actually do take our dreams from things that we're thinking about to things that we're being about. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that our words kind of dictate our actions, right? And so when we say we're trying, it's almost like letting ourselves off the hook. It's like giving ourselves an A for effort. Versus actually committing to something. And along the lines, another switch that I like to make is I'm a big believer in using the word and this is like really important right now, since there's a lot of women who are balancing, homeschooling plus running a business, or homeschooling plus working for a company. Is I felt, at least when the quarantine first happened, because I have a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old. So I had him like 2 weeks prior to the
Oh my God.
quarantine, but before lockdown, is I found myself picking and choosing. Like I could be a business owner, I could be a mom. And now I'm a really big believer in and. So I'm like, how do I be present and run a successful business? And when you do that, your brain starts to create opportunities and it starts to create solutions versus I'm either going to be a really successful a businesswoman, or I'm going to be a successful and present mom. We can be
Mm-hmm.
both. So start
Mm-hmm.
incorporating and into your language and get rid of the word try and just do it. Like I am doing this and I can do this and that. Or how do I do this and that? And your mind will start formulating solutions for you.
Well, it's like what you say, that behavior is a reflection of our beliefs, and that there is essentially the only way to perfect a plan is to put it into action and to go for it. And these are direct quotes from your book, and I think that that is so huge to remember. And I think what's interesting is that there are certain women in the world who find it easier to believe that they can be the and, that they can have it all, that they can do all these things, and then you have other gals who struggle with that type of belief in themselves and those kinds of limiting mindsets, and that maybe were programmed in from day one, or maybe it's from traumatic past experiences, or maybe it's from a fear of failure. There's all these different reasons why women aren't able to sort of make that leap mentally, which ultimately will affect what they do realistically. So can you tell us about I love the belief gap, talking about that kind of that gap in your book. So what is the belief gap, and how can we do a better job working with it?
Yeah, so the belief gap is basically the gap between the mindset that you have right now and the mindset that you need to achieve your goal.
Mhm,
So, one of the things that I do, and this is perfect timing since we're coming up on the new year, when I am doing my goal setting for the year,
mhm.
I not only write down the goal and I make sure that it's specific, and I have like this method that I use that isn't SMART goals. I use a method called the clarity method. But one of the things I do is I say, who must I become in order to achieve that goal? Right? So if like I had a goal of writing this book and I wrote it in 21 days. Before
Wow.
that, I did not consider myself a writer. Like I would struggle to come up with an Instagram caption. Like 30 minutes later, my cursor was still blinking at me. So the idea of writing a book, I had the desire, but I didn't see myself as an author. And so when I made the commitment to write the book, I said, what does a writer do? If I was an author of a book, what would I need to do on a consistent basis? What would I need to believe? And I did that before I ever wrote. Now, I know that sounds kind of like woo woo and kind of like dancing through a field of flowers saying kumbaya, and it sounds kind of out there, but
Not at
it
all.
works. But
Not
it
at all.
works, right? So if what you're
Yeah.
doing right now isn't working, then you have to be open to trying something different. So I'm always thinking about who must I become in order to achieve a particular goal.
Well, and it's so true, because I think we tend to separate a goal or a vision or a dream from who we are as individuals, right? Like we don't always ask ourselves, like, who do we have to become in order to reach that goal? Like, how do we have to, from how we wake up to how we take our coffee to how we work out, like how we operate has to fundamentally evolve to be able to even come close to tapping into these big, audacious monster goals, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, is because you're asking like for example, if you are saying that you're like an aspiring writer, or you're like a wannabe yoga instructor, or you're a someday business owner. I mean, these are really kind of back to that point of um procrastination disguised as preparation, disguised as a someday versus a why not now, and if not now, when, right? So
Exactly.
so I think this is a really good segue into talking about the myths of motivation, because I think a lot of our listeners have been to a situation where they're thinking, well, when I'm motivated, I'll be motivated to do this when, or, well, I'll be feeling motivated at some point to kind of like really explore this and dive in. But in your book, you basically kind of say that there are a lot of myths around motivation. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think sometimes we put way too much emphasis on being motivated, right? Or
Yeah.
feeling motivated. And I think sometimes yes, you will have these moments of inspiration. but those moments go away, right? And so you're not always going to be motivated. And if you look at women in particular who are successful in their life, in their personal life, and in business, you will find that they take action regardless of whether or not they're feeling motivated. And the funny thing about it is when you take action, that motivation starts to come. Right. And then the other thing I think is that we also sometimes just look at motivation as this like moment of inspiration. Whereas I also like to think about motivation as what is your motive to take action? And I find that a lot of times when people struggle with that consistent motivation, or they struggle to consistently take action and be disciplined, it's because they're not clear on what their motive is to begin with. And so I'll give you a real example in my life. So I wanted to write a book for years. But the reality was I really didn't have a motive for wanting to write a book aside from the fact that I wanted to write a book. And the reality was working, right? And so working at my previous job, I wouldn't have even been able to promote the book because of my employee contract. But when I left, and less than 2 months later, my book was done because my motive had changed. I was clear about my why. I was clear about my motive. I was clear about how I was going to use that book and what the purpose was. And so, same goal, but I was clear on my motive, and then I took action. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, if you're struggling with motivation, I would say number one, what is your motive for that goal? And then after that, focus on having just enough motivation to start and then take consistent action. And that's going to help you build momentum. And momentum is so much more important and powerful than just motivation, because motivation is like
Mm-hmm.
up and down. And like, and you probably experienced this that early in the morning, like you're super motivated, and 2 hours later, something could have happened and like you're down in the dumps. And now you have to pick yourself back up. And it's just taking that consistent action and building momentum is going to be the key to achieving your goals.
It's so true. I mean, it's like being motivated and inspired is like falling in love, but then momentum is like staying married happily, right? It's
Exactly.
like two different, you know. And also I think that's interesting is like so the root of motivation is motive, and so you're peeling the motive out of motivation and saying let's start there, and then you can add the ation on later, but make sure you're clear. And so tell me about when you had this goal and this vision and this dream of this book. Was it on your vision board? When did you start becoming a vision board evangelist? I'm a huge believer in the annual vision board party with my girlfriends. We all drink wine and we get together and we cut out all the magazine, all the different magazine images and words. And it really is my favorite annual tradition in end of December between Christmas and New Year's. But tell me when you got into it, your approach to it, why you believe it's powerful, and how people listening that maybe are not familiar with this practice can get started.
Yeah, so I created my first vision board back in 2009.
Okay.
And my former CEO said, "Hey, I need you to basically get a piece of poster board, cut out some pictures of the goals that you want to accomplish, and have at it. It's going to help you manifest all this stuff." And so I did what most people did, right? I went to the store, grabbed a poster board, a ton of magazines from half price books, spent the afternoon cutting out pictures, and like cross my fingers and hope that like miraculously a year later my life would be different. And it wasn't.
Mhm.
And so the next year I basically had the same goals and just changed it from 2009 to 2010. And so I and so after a couple years I figured, if people are talking about vision boards are so important, why am I not manifesting the things on my
Mm.
board? And then I realized that I was doing what a lot of people were doing, which is just cutting out random pictures and hoping that my life would miraculously change. And that's not how it works. So in 2015, I held my first vision board event where I started sharing with people the process that I had kind of come up with via trial and error the last like 6 years before that. And I really developed a process that worked well for me. So, for example, I'll tell you like a common mistake that people make is that they get their boards, and before they get clear about what they want, they start flipping through magazines. And they say that they're looking for inspiration, but what ends up happening, Erin, is they create a wish list, right,
Mm.
of all these things that they want. So I want the dream house, I want the yacht, I want the abs, I want like the perfect husband, and I want to be like vegan, and like right. And they create all of these things that are so far from their reality that it's hard for them to actually buy into it and feel like it's tangible. And
Mm-hmm.
so I tell people, you need to get clear about your goals before you ever open a magazine. Actually, I don't even use magazines anymore, but you need to get clear about what your goals are first. The other thing that I find, and I could spend all day on this, but I'll just tell you the second biggest mistake that I see people make is they have like all these random words and their board gets really cluttered. And I was speaking at a conference last year, and the lady said, I created a vision board and I looked at it and it was so cluttered, it gave me an anxiety. So I ended up having to flip it over so I couldn't see it.
Oh
And so
gosh.
I teach my clients to organize their board where they can see all of their goals for the year, but it's organized in a way that they only need to see one quadrant to focus on the goals for that quarter. And I'm a big believer to have less
Nice.
words and more pictures. So, quick rule of thumb: 80% pictures, 20% words. The
Mm.
way that your mind processes pictures is much, much different than just seeing a word. So, imagine if you look at the word Hawaii versus looking at a picture of the resort that you know you want to take your dream vacation to. It's going to resonate a lot deeper looking at that picture than just looking at the word Hawaii. So, those are just some quick tips, but I have a whole process that I teach my clients and how to use their vision board as a roadmap versus a collage.
That is already so helpful to how I'm going to be doing my vision board differently in a couple of weeks. And I think you have a free, we link to it in the show notes. You have a vision board course, or there's something on your website that we link to. What is it called again?
Yeah, so I do an annual vision board master class where I
That's right.
basically walk through the process that I teach my clients. So if you've created a vision board in the past, but you didn't manifest any of those things, and you're like, I really love doing it, but I would more like I would like to actually manifest more of the things that are on there. That would be great. If you've heard about vision boards, but you've never done one, and you don't want to just cut out random pictures, you really want to have more of a roadmap that gives you a plan so you know exactly what to focus on and when. That would be a great class for you to sign up for, and it's free.
It sounds fantastic, and I am totally signing up. It sounds awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the quick pivot from here. So we have our vision board. We have, we're talking about the importance of taking action and actualizing from thoughts to things and the power of word and the myth of motivation. What is the goal setting trap? Because I read that and I thought it was so interesting that to think of goal setting as anything other than positive and open and freeing and igniting, but you have this thing you call the goal setting trap. So can you break that down for our listeners and explain how we can avoid it?
Yeah, so the goal setting trap, and I'm sure most people can relate, right? January rolls around and you get this goal in your mind, and going back to that motivation word, you are super motivated. And you're
Mm-hmm.
so motivated that you start taking action, whatever that goal is. Maybe it's working out, so you're going to the gym, or maybe you're taking a walk around the park, right? But you're so motivated that motivation leads you to action, and you're consistent for 2 3 weeks maybe, and then you get distracted, right? You get distracted by life, you get distracted by responsibilities, you get distracted by your own kind of mind and other goals, and then you look up and all of a sudden a week has gone by, you haven't worked out, you're eating the same foods you were eating before, and then all of a sudden 6 months goes by and you're like, oh crap, half the year is over and I'm further from my goal than I originally started. And you find yourself feeling frustrated because you're like, why can I not do this? I keep doing
Mm-hmm.
the same thing over and over and over again. So you try to kick yourself back in the butt and kind of get back on track. And it's the same thing. 6 months later, you're back in the same place and you're setting the same goals for the next year. So that's what I call the goal setting trap. And I
Yeah.
believe it's actually like 92% of people who set their goals, particularly New Year's resolutions, don't achieve them because
Mm.
they go through this same cycle. I'm motivated, I take action, I get distracted, then I get frustrated, I do the same thing over and over. So if you want to learn how to get out of the goal setting trap, you have to get outside of the motivation piece for one, but you also have to get crystal clear about what your goals are. And then more importantly, why is that goal important? All right. So
Mm-hmm.
once you start getting clarity about it, one, I'm pretty sure your goals are going to narrow down. So instead of focusing on 20 goals for that year, you may have really 5 things that are really meaningful for you. And you're tapped into the emotional reason why that goal is going to be important. And then you need a plan. Aaron, you'd be surprised how many people I talk to and they tell me all of their goals. I'm like, great, how are you going to get there? And they're like, Now it's important to
Oh.
commit to it before you try to figure out the how, but you need a plan. Then you need to get your mindset right. And then you need to actually be able to execute.
Lareal, you're making me feel like I need to rethink exactly how I'm planning out 2021. I just, because it's true. I mean, to your point, I mean, it's so complicated to make it simple, right? I mean, it's so easy to like rattle off those 20 things. I could do it right now, live online with everyone. But to pare it down to those 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 core objectives that are actually, have an 8% chance of being achievable a year later, it's tricky and it's tough. So I think that's where a lot of us fall into that analysis paralysis or procrastination, or as you said in your book, indecisiveness, which does, as you say in your book, have an opportunity cost. When we are frozen, when we are being those people who are like, you know what, I never even keep my resolutions, so why even make them in the first place? Like, I'm not even gonna try, because a 92% failure rate of resolution, honoring resolutions. No wonder people are like, well, I don't do resolutions. They're stupid. You never actually lose the 10 pounds, or,
Yeah.
you never get rich and skinny and happy and all these things. So why even try? And that's even sadder, right? Like the give up and and that feeling of failure before it's even begun. I mean, that is just depressing to me, So you have this whole list of words in your book, and you call them the F words. And they're not the F words that one might think you're talking about. Can you tell us more about those F words and how we can weave them into making sure that we aren't just another stat in 2021 of people who had the best intentions but fell short yet again?
Yeah, so the F words, and actually that's like one of my favorite chapters. It talks about fear and failure. And I think for a lot of people, those things go hand in hand. That a lot of times that people are not pursuing their goals because of that fear, because we think about that 92% versus thinking about what do I need to do to be part of the 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's the fear of the unknown. Sometimes it's even fear of success that keeps
Yeah.
us from pursuing. It's fear of having to outgrow ourselves or outgrow other people and doing things that we have historically been uncomfortable with. But I feel like if we learn how to harness that fear, I think there's this kind of idea of being fearless. And so the moment that people feel a sense of like insecurity or self-doubt, we think there's something wrong with us. When I'm a big believer that just makes you human, and it's being able to feel that fear and push past it. The other F
Mm-hmm.
word is failure. I think none of us were raised, the majority of us were raised that failure was bad, right? If I came home with a D or an F, my mom was not like, great, you failed, right? It was, go to your
Mine
room,
neither.
you're not going to the party, and you're not going to the football game, right?
Yeah.
But now as adults, the only way that we learn is by failure. And it's so funny having a 9-month-old, because he's learning to walk. And I didn't expect him to go from crawling and the first time he tried to walk to like take off running. Like he fell and I was like, yes, right? And
Yeah.
then he tried again and he fell again. I was like, yes. And I celebrated his failure. Right? I celebrated the small wins. I celebrated the small progress. But as adults, we don't do that. And so I think if we learn to embrace failure and say, what can I learn? What did that teach me? Our whole perspective begins to change. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of mention back to that 92%
Mm-hmm.
is a big aha for me, Erin, was realizing that it's not only important to have goals, but it's also important to have vision. And I find a lot of people set goals, and the reason they don't achieve it is it isn't tied to something bigger. Right. So it's one thing to say, I want to lose 10 pounds. It's totally different to say, I want to have a healthier lifestyle. I want to be around for my family. I want to be able to hike with my husband. I want to be able to play with my kids. Like that's completely different than I want to just look good in a bikini. Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a clear vision, and then you have goals that help you execute the vision. And that was a huge learning lesson for me, because I was checking off all these goals, 6-figure business, and have the husband and the house and the car, and I was still unfulfilled. And
Yeah.
I felt a sense of guilt, and I realized I had goals and no vision. So you need to have both.
Lareal, that is so, so good. And there's so much to unpack. And you just dropped like 17 knowledge bombs. I want to go back to first the concept of this idea of fear and failure and why we're so terrified of it and how it holds us back. And one of my friends who you would love, I don't know if you've ever met Judy Holler, who wrote a book called Fear is My Homeboy. Do you know Judy Holler?
No,
By chance?
but I'm definitely going to check it out.
I will connect you guys. The two of you would have like a 5-hour conversation that would be just epic. So she says that it's not about being fearless, but it's about fearing our fears less, which I love that so much because it makes me feel like it's okay to know that there's never this place when you're doing the scary thing and you're starting the venture or you're quitting that unhealthy behavior or you're moving into the relationship or you're chasing down the dream or you're pulling the trigger on the big investment or whatever it is. It's really comforting to know that you're never going to have that 100% zero sense of fear, fully comfortable, I'm getting a massage type feeling. Like that's never going to be real, know? And I think once you embrace that, it really is kind of liberating because you realize that that feeling of this is kind of scary is actually an indicator that you're actually doing something that matters. You're actually making them move outside your comfort zone. Because if you're not, it's comfortable. It's the opposite of fear, right? And I forget who I was talking to a couple weeks ago about fear around the pandemic and, just 2020 and the vaccine and the cases rising and all this doom and gloom about the holidays and just all the heavy shit that we've all been dealing with for the last, month in particular here in the States. And we were talking about how important it is to talk about our goals for 2020 because it engineers a sense of calm and it creates that sense of order for us. We feel like if we have a plan, we have a purpose. And if we have a purpose, we have some sense of even an illusion of control in very tumultuous and chaotic times. And if that's what we need to anchor on to feel like we're not just going down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole of madness, it's kind of a secondary benefit to, this entire process that we're talking about. And so I was talking to my friend and they were like, it's funny. We set these goals and these objectives. And let's say, for example, it was like to run a marathon. Okay, so what happens? So you train for the marathon for the whole year. You're working super hard. You finally, you crush the marathon. You're in tears. You're covered in the foil. You have the pictures for Instagram. It's this whole wonderful, like top of the mountain, the summit, everything. And my brother was supposed to run the Boston Marathon, by the way, and it got canceled. So he ran it around his neighborhood, actually, which is crazy. And when it was over, he was super excited and super proud and he achieved the goal, right? Like he accomplished the vision. And then sure enough, a week later, you know exactly what he was already planning on doing, which was next year, he's going to run it again, but 15 minutes faster, right? Like it's that reset, like the hedonic treadmill of adaptation of once we achieve the goal, we just set the pin further. And so I think that what I love about your book is it kind of reframes failure from a bad thing to a good thing, because if we haven't run the marathon, if we haven't got the 6 figures, if we haven't bought the house and found the man and created the family and done whatever the dream is for you, if you haven't done it, technically, we're all in a state of constant failure. Like if we're not doing it, right? So once we realize that failure is not this like horrible, scary thing to be avoided, but it's like also AKA just reality as a human. And it's actually a beautiful thing that teaches us and helps us and fuels us, like you were saying earlier, and learning how we can grow and be better. I think that reframing can be a game changer for how you even look at some of these potential opportunities and whether or not you do choose to take them. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. One of the things that I did get from my when I was working in corporate, my CEO, one of the first things he said was fail hard and fail fast. And so he's like, go out there and fail a lot. And so when I do corporate training, that's one of the things that I would tell people is because we're role playing different scenarios. And they're like, well, you can do that because you're the trainer. Like I could never actually have that conversation. And I would say the only difference between you and me is I failed a lot more than you did. Right. And that's really it. The more that we can fail, and now I try to like fail on purpose. And I treat everything as a hypothesis. Like, well, let me try this and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, at least I'll know what I need to do different. And I think a lot of times we're trying to get everything perfect beforehand, and life just does not happen that way. And so we create this unrealistic expectation for ourselves. And then as a result, the moment you hit a roadblock, we stop versus saying, okay, well, that didn't work. What did I learn from it? I
It's
guarantee,
so
like, I can
true.
tell you, I would not be here where I'm at today if I did not fail a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot more. And now it's like, how much can I fail? Because now I
Mm,
know the more I fail, the quicker I'm going to get to my goal.
that's
But if
so
you're
good.
trying to avoid failing, you're not going to succeed. Like, I can
That's so
guarantee
good.
that.
That's so good. And it's so true. And it's funny because people say, oh, you're the trainer or you're this. So in my space, I'm a social media communications marketing person. I've worked with brands helping with digital and communication and social for the last 15 years. And I always say the same thing. I'm like, the only thing that makes me more of an expert than anyone in this room is I have found like 900,000 things that are not going to work to grow your business and brand, and a couple things that do. And so it's just
Exactly.
that constant just facing the firing squad that allows us, to your point, to garner that expertise and gain that knowledge and build that encyclopedia of experience that we need as reference to teach from. And so I can't retweet what you're saying enough. And I think that if someone is listening to this podcast and you're inspired by Lareal the way I am, I think that ask yourself, what are you really afraid of? And also, what is the best that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? And honestly, like these times, I mean, has there ever been a better time to roll the dice on projects and roll the dice on initiatives when the world is in upheaval and the definition of success has changed so much? I mean, for some of my friends, I don't know how the Lipkins household's doing, but in our house, like it's a good day if everyone's not like yelling and like everyone's getting out of bed and we put on clothes and worked out and didn't just like eat popcorn and like feel sorry for ourselves. Like it, like the definition of success is as the bar is lower than it used to be, you know? So
And
what a great time to reinvent.
and you know what? And I say right now is the absolute best time to set your goals. And here's why. I find before 2020, a lot of people, let's just say, had rose colored glasses. Like, we were setting goals that maybe weren't that important to us, and we weren't really clear about what was important to us. But after a year of so much uncertainty, like, we should be more clear now more than ever about what's truly important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think now is the perfect time for you to say, a year from now, what do I want to have accomplished? What experiences do I want to have? What things do I want to check off a year, like, a year from now, to say that I move the needle forward? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think now is like one of the best times. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to like, well, let me kind of wait to see what's going to happen. No, like, this is the moment where you kind of put your flag out there, you hang your shingle out there, and you say, let me give it a try. Because like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and now is the absolute best time for you to be trying to do new things and reinventing and really putting yourself out there and taking a risk.
Well, it's so well said, and it's so true. And I think for some of the real go-getters, the entrepreneurs, the salespeople, the small business owners, the hustlers that are listening to this podcast, and you are people, so we get it and we know. Sometimes the goal, for me anyway, like for 2021, like what this time has taught me, like to tap into what you were saying about this pause and this reset and this moment of stillness that we've all been forced to experience. For me, what I've learned in this weird time is that my goals actually have to do with subtraction and not addition. Like
Me
it's
too.
not about the more and the extra and the more and the list and the adding. But for me, what I've come to realize in these last 10 months or 10 years or however long it's been, I have no idea, um is that I would like to, my what I value, to your point from the very beginning, my motive, I guess you could say, or what's my why, or my what I think is important, is a subtraction of excess and a subtraction of components and projects and strategies and initiatives that don't really serve those around me that I love as much as I thought they did. And they don't really serve my audience as much as I thought they did. That they serve a different purpose that isn't that important anymore. So to your point, like the rose colored glasses, this is a new kind of pandemic lens that we can view our goals through. And your goal might be, maybe it's doing less, maybe it's doing the one thing, maybe it's
Yep.
subtracting the person or the pressure or the pleasing or the permission seeking or the negative self-talk. Maybe it's a removal more than like a doing more. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I look at my business today versus a year ago, like half of my programs I got rid of. Right? It was about, how do I simplify? And one of the
Mm,
things that I did which was really life changing for me, and I think would be helpful for your audience as well, is I would normally set my goals and start with the like, what do I want to accomplish from a business perspective? And this year, what I did was, what do I want my life to look like and feel like a year from now? And I literally grabbed a piece of flip chart paper, put like 3 sections, and wrote that out. And then I said, how do I need to change my business to align with that?
Mm.
And like, it was getting rid of programs, it was getting rid of certain clients, it was offering different programs, it was really simplifying my business, it was putting systems in place. And then the third column was, who must I become to make that happen? In not only my business but in my life. And it was really transformative for me because it was a completely different way of setting my goals and kind of hitting that reset. And like you said, simplify. It isn't about adding more. This year you should have more clarity about what's important, so you should have less goals. This year I'm
Mhm.
looking at my vision board that I'm working on for 2021. I don't have 12 things. I have like 6 things that are really, really important to me. And yes, I
Yeah.
may accomplish other things, but I'm so laser focused on the things that really align with my values, that it isn't about doing more. It's about being more present, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and that's so powerful. And once you tackle that, I mean, man, we all know that feeling of when we actually figure out a way to be here now.
Yeah.
We've all experienced the shiver and the sparkles that happen in our world when we find a way to just pause and be and exist. Everything else falls into place. And yet it can be so challenging, especially with social media and this crazy year with politics and pandemics and all the things. And so I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this, to hear what Lareal is saying, and ask yourself, what is that for you? What are those 5 or 6 things? And maybe it's one, maybe it's three, maybe it is six, but maybe it's not 25 images from magazines that are not really what is going to best serve you going forward, especially in the weird now or the new normal, or however you want to call, these tumultuous times. So I think that's so brilliant and brave, and just there's so much goodness, Larry, on what you're talking about. And I just think that, for anyone who is kind of like hearing this and feeling super amped to turn a new page for 2021, aka all of us, I think that your vision board experience sounds like a great first step. So I would just encourage everyone who's listening to check out Lareal's vision board masterclass. I'll put a link in the show notes. What a great, easy action step to start to find that clarity and set yourself up for success, not just for 2021, but hopefully for beyond. So, Lareal, you are just a joy and a light. So brilliant, so awesome. Sorry about all of our tech issues, but I think we worked it out, hopefully. And before I let you go, a quick question. I know you're an avid reader and writer and consumer of all things big, brilliant ideas and people. Are you reading anyone's book by chance, or in the last couple of months, have you read any books by any authors that really sort of helped you to find more clarity or really sparked a new fire for you that you could share with my highlighters?
Yes. So the book that comes to mind, well, two actually. One is by Marshawn Evans Daniels, and her book
Okay.
is called Believe Bigger.
Okay.
Another book that I'm actually reading right now is James Clear, Atomic Habits. And a book that I have on my list to read because it is in pre-sale is actually my business coach, Rachel Rogers. She has a book coming out called We Should All Be Millionaires, which I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But it's really talking about how women can change the world when we build wealth. And it's really about boundary
Mm.
setting. And so that's on my to-do list, but I've already pre-ordered it.
Well, you are certainly one of the women that I know that are changing the world. And if we can all, rising tide lifts all boats. So let's all share the secrets. Let's share the abundance. Let's share the ideas, because we should all be millionaires. And if women were all millionaires, could you imagine the world? I mean, I am here for that. So I am adding that book to my list ASAP. Lareal, thank you so much for spending this time and sharing all of your super transparent backstory and your brilliant strategies and your positive energy. You are so inspiring on so many levels, and I cannot wait for our paths to cross soon in the real world. So thanks to Kate Franklin and the Traveling Vineyard team for connecting us through keynotes, and you're just a light. So I appreciate you, and on behalf of my whole crew, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Erin.
Have a great week. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.